There are many ways to become a great pharaoh. Some rule with wisdom and justice like King Solomon. Others use their intellect to build grand projects like Imhotep. And some pharaohs, well, they rewrite history itself to become the legends of their own lifetimes. Ramses II is the most famous example, a warrior king whose victories made him immortal and whose intelligence saved an empire. But before he built Abu Simbel and the Ramesseum or bent the Hittites to his will, Ramses was just a prince. And when civil wars shook Egypt, he had to escape from the capital and live under false pretenses. How did Prince Ramses survive the war? How did he return to become the longest ruling pharaoh? And how did he reshape Egyptian culture forever? Welcome to Ancient Egypt. Today we tell the tale of Ramses the usurper, the boy who saved Egypt and became its most famous pharaoh. The story of Ramses starts with a civil war, a conflict between two royal families claiming the throne of Egypt. A man named Setnakht, ruler of Thebes, had taken the throne, seizing control of the southern part of Egypt. But the north was ruled by another family. The seat of power was still held by the current pharaoh, but the royal wife and her son, the future Ramesses, had fled south to Thebes for safety. Under the protection of Queen Isis, Ramses grew up knowing his birthright. He was the rightful heir to the throne, but he also knew the dangers around him. If anyone discovered his identity, he might be killed. So while studying in Thebes, he kept his lineage secret, living under the name of a commoner. The boy who would be king. It wasn't long before Ramses' mother remarried. Her new husband was none other than Seti, the man who had seized much of Egypt. Ramses now had not just one but two powerful reasons to keep his head down. If Seti had lost his life, the throne would likely go to his next heir, which could spell doom for Ramses. So he continued to study, hoping that one day he might rise to power. It was a long wait, but finally the time came. Seti was old and without an heir. He was willing to do anything to keep the throne in the family. So he offered Ramses a choice: marry my daughter and become the crown prince, or watch the kingdom fall apart. This was a dangerous gamble. Ramses would essentially be trading one prison for another. But there was no other choice if he wanted the throne. Ramses married the princess, took the title of crown prince, and began to prepare for the inevitable. Now that he was back in the capital, he could observe the court and learn about the kingdom. Once he ascended to the throne, he would need to know everything. While Ramses worked in the shadows, Seti became increasingly paranoid. He had already murdered several members of his own family to ensure no rival could take the throne. But as his end approached, he grew more and more suspicious. Was Ramses plotting against him? The old pharaoh decided to put this question to rest once and for all. He summoned Ramses to his side. With his eyes fixed on his stepson, he ordered Ramses to undress. Then he searched him thoroughly, making sure the prince was hiding nothing. Then, with a dark look in his eye, he chained Ramses up and left him overnight in the palace treasury. Clearly, Seti didn't trust his heir. But he wasn't worried. If Ramses was planning a rebellion, it would happen in the middle of the night. And when the sun rose, he would surely be the first to know. Ramses spent the night in chains, but as dawn broke, something unexpected happened. The treasury began to fill with water. Every vase and statue was covered with mud. Seti would never get out alive. Realizing what was happening, Ramses struggled against his bonds. He needed to free himself. If he stayed there any longer, he'd drown. Fortunately, the flood gave him a chance. The rising water level loosened the ropes. Finally, freed, Ramses ran from the palace. He didn't stop until he reached the sanctuary of the goddess Hathor, where he was safe. Seti had just sealed his own fate, and Ramses was now next in line for the throne. But before he could claim the crown, he had to solve one little problem. His father-in-law was dead. Seti's body had been found in the flooded treasury, and everyone believed he'd simply drowned. But Ramses knew the truth. He ordered the priests to perform a ritual to resurrect Seti, but it was clear his soul had already moved on. Ramses was now the new pharaoh, but it would be a long time before his people accepted him. No one believed the gentle prince was capable of ruling Egypt. But Ramses surprised them all. He was a natural leader, brave, charismatic, and above all else, intelligent. In less than a year, he'd convinced his people he was the right man for the job. There was only one obstacle left: his reputation. To truly become pharaoh, Ramses had to prove himself as a warrior. And fortunately for him, he wouldn't have to wait long. The Hittite Empire was preparing for war. Their forces were massing along the border, ready to invade. There was only one thing for Ramses to do. He gathered his army and prepared to fight. He knew he couldn't afford to lose, not if he wanted to become a legendary pharaoh. But while Ramses was confident in his ability to lead, he was inexperienced on the battlefield. Luckily for him, he had the greatest general Egypt had ever seen, his own father, General Horemheb. Together, Pharaoh and General would crush the Hittite army and establish a new era of peace. Unfortunately, this story has a slightly bitter ending because we don't know exactly what happened. We have the records written by the Egyptians, but their version of events is clearly biased, glorifying their own pharaoh and demonizing the Hittites. The Hittite records, however, are completely missing. Without them, we can only speculate about the truth behind the legend. Did Ramses win a great victory, or was it a crushing defeat? We may never know. But there's one thing we can be certain about. Ramses II was a great builder, so great that many scholars call him the father of Egyptian architecture. During his reign, he completed more building projects than any other pharaoh before or after him. We'll explore these wonders in Part 3, including the two greatest building projects of the ancient world. But first, let's finish the story of Ramses the warrior. After defeating the Hittites, Ramses embarked on a series of military campaigns, each more spectacular than the last. He fought across the Middle East, clashing with the Libyans in the west and the Syrians in the east. He even led armies into the heart of the Hittite Empire, conquering cities and submitting entire nations. Everywhere he went, Ramses built monuments to his own glory, pillars inscribed with his victories and images of the pharaoh smiting his enemies. But Ramses wasn't just a brutal conqueror. He was also a skilled diplomat. In fact, he's best remembered for brokering a lasting peace treaty with the Hittites, an agreement that lasted for generations. According to the Egyptian records, Ramses met the Hittite king in the middle, dividing the land between them. But this version of events doesn't hold up to scrutiny. In reality, the Hittites had the upper hand, and Ramses was lucky to even escape with his life. Regardless of how it really happened, Ramses returned home a hero. And the next few decades were known as the Golden Age of Egypt. The country flourished, trade increased, and the arts experienced a revival under the patronage of the pharaoh. Building projects were everywhere, and Egypt became one of the richest countries in the world. Unfortunately, Ramses' good fortune didn't last forever. As the old pharaoh grew weaker, rival princes began to plot. His son, Khemwaset, tried to usurp the throne, but Ramses defeated him and blinded him. Another son, Merneptah, was banished from the kingdom. Yet another contender, Seti, was sent to rule over Nubia. Only one son remained, the crown prince, but he too would cause Ramses nothing but grief. The boy was named Tut, and he suffered from a rare medical condition. His feet were badly deformed, making it difficult for him to walk. Ramses was furious. Could this be the end of his bloodline? The throne of Egypt would pass to a deformed child. The pharaoh was desperate, and he considered passing over Tut entirely. He could name his favorite daughter, Hennet, as heir. After all, women had ruled Egypt before. But such a decision would violate tradition, and Ramses knew better than to upset the people. So he chose Tut as his successor, but he kept him close, guiding every decision and watching his son closely. It didn't take long to discover Tut was harmless and couldn't be a threat. Still, Ramses had learned his lesson. He would never let another prince live too comfortably. As Tut grew up, Ramses kept him working, giving him menial tasks and humiliating him in public. The poor boy had no idea why his father hated him so much. He worked hard trying to please the pharaoh, but nothing was ever good enough. Tutushamun died after only 66 days on the throne. Next in line was the man Ramses had exiled years before, Seti. But the old pharaoh didn't care. By this point, he was ready to pass the torch. And Seti, though a usurper, would prove to be an able ruler, continuing many of Ramses' projects and policies, including the construction of temples. It seems the greatest builder of ancient Egypt saved his greatest projects for his successor. These temples were unlike any before them. Carved deep into the mountainside, they were virtually indestructible. And though they were built 3,000 years ago, they still stand today. Tomorrow, we'll enter the temples of Abu Simbel and explore the enigma of Nefertari. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss this epic adventure.